everyone. Welcome to the Readercon annual rapid fire reading from Broad Universe. Broad Universe is an international nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting, encouraging, honoring, and celebrating women and alternatively gendered writers and editors in science fiction, fantasy, horror, and other speculative genres. Find out more at broaduniverse.org. So my name is E.C. Ambrose, and I'm going to be your host for the next little while. I have with me 7 amazing writers, each reading something completely different, which is half of the fun. So I hope that you will enjoy the following short readings. We're going to begin with L.J. Cohen. L.J. is a writer, potter, and relentless optimist. After 25 years as a physical therapist, L.J. uses her skills to injure characters in science fiction and fantasy novels. The 5th and final book of her Halcyon Space series was published in 2018 for your binge reading pleasure. You can visit her online at www.ljcohen.net.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to be reading from Derelict, the first book in the series that I quickly describe as Firefly meets Lost in Space. The only setup you'll need for this very brief reading is 4 young people have gotten themselves stuck on a ship that woke up basically from the dead and is trying to kill them. Bear set the music to loop slowly. It distorted the sound, making it even less melodic and more eerie. How was he going to make sense of this? Something was coming at them. Given his luck, it wouldn't be a convenient rescue ship. He didn't much care about what happened to him. It wasn't like he had a whole lot waiting for him back on Daedalus Station, but he owed it to his brother. He sunk to the floor, sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, focusing not on the individual noises the AI co-opted for notes, but on the phrases, the pauses, the way the music made him feel. That's how he always interacted with new music, and this was the newest of the new. The distraction of the emergency lights and Rose and Micah's fear kept pulling him away. Bear took a deep breath and shut off the external speaker. The only way to do this would be to let the music fill him up again, hoping he could ride the wave this time instead of drown. The concerns of the derelict ship and their possibly unwelcome company faded, but before he could trigger the recording, new melodies spilled into him. He held his breath, straining to listen with his whole body. Woven into the barrage of sound, something seemed familiar. He traced the line of a descant, high, wordless, yet filled with defiance and despair. Bear recognized the emotions he had poured into his last composition. "Oh, yes," he whispered. He smiled and played the refrain back to the AI. It echoed back to him, distorted but unmistakable, with a new refrain added. This one made his arms break out in goosebumps. He understood the sound of fear and composed a flute solo in his head, a thin wail. The computer added the line to its composition: anger, desperation, fear. A melody that he always thought of as the sound of Daedalus Station flitted through his mind. He played it for the AI, hoping it meant home. The music fell silent. Bear's heart beat a wild rhythm. He was no programming genius like Jem or Roe. It wasn't like he could wrest control of the ship from its damaged computer. All he could do was play music. He played his fear for his brother. He played Roe's reckless competence. He didn't know Micah well enough to add him to the mix, but he figured that wouldn't matter. This would have to be enough. For himself, he repeated the main melody from his own score. I'm like you. I'm broken, but I want to survive. Please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LJ. That was intriguing and lovely. So our next reader for the evening is going to be Sacchi Green. Sacchi writes erotica, and edits anthologies, including speculative fiction, whenever she can get away with it. You can find her online at sacchigreen.com.
This is going to be from my story Trollwise in my anthology Witches, Princesses, and Women at Arms, which was a Lambda finalist. Yordis followed Harold that day only because he was so determined not to be followed. Whatever drew him must be worth seeing, since he had at least stopped pining for the fjords and his dragon ship and the girls at home, as he'd done throughout the visit to their uncle's domain. Must have something to do with the girl, though. She'd seen him out past the cattle byre last night with the cowherd, their expressions and gestures and rough laughter reeking of lascivious intent. The fellow must have told him where to find some particularly tempting morsel. It was easy enough to keep out of Harold's sight. Yordis wore a pair of his brown leggings rather than her own skirt. She could move up slope and down slope from boulder to boulder with far more ease than her seafaring brother. She was at home here in ways that he was not, and would inherit these lands when the time came. Harold crested a ridge and stood enthralled before starting down into the stream-carved vale that Yordis had thought of as her own personal retreat. From the look on his face, it was not the stream spreading out into a little marsh that drew him, nor the waterfall from which it flowed, nor the reeds and flowers, nor the dense growth of spruce on the slope beyond, with tender new growth at the tip of each branch so brilliant it looked like a host of tiny green flames. No, it was some brazen naked woman she saw when, forsaking stealth, she reached the ridge top. By then, Harold wouldn't have noticed if she hurled stones at him, that she was sorely tempted to do, or at the woman, scarcely more than a girl, reclining on the sunlit rock where Yordis liked best to sit. Slim, long-legged, with pale hair streaming past her exquisite face over her shoulders. Surely this was an illusion born of Harold's fantasies, and Yordis had to admit, of her own. Then the girl tilted back her head, gazed up at them both, opened her lovely mouth, and sang. The clear, high sound flowed over Yordis, piercing her body, pulsing in her veins. An illusion indeed, an enchantment out of the storied past, when young troll girls in the Holdra form enticed men with their songs. Harold, besotted, charged down the slope, compelled by the song and the promise of that enticing vision. A surge of rage saved Yordis from such madness. The song, the enchantment, none of it was meant for her, never for her. She glared down like an avenging Valkyrie. Let the seductress do as she would with him. But as Harold stumbled, the girl vanished. There was nothing to see but empty rock. He searched all around in frenzy, peering into the stream as though she might have swum away like a mermaiden. Yordis descended without hurry. Go on home, she told her brother. You look like you've seen a ghost. The air this high in the mountains has that effect on those not suited to it. Harold was not about to tell his sister what he'd been hoping for. He stomped off, and by the top of the ridge he was breathing hard. Yordis perched on the edge of the rock. When she was quite sure Harold was gone, she said calmly, You might as well come out now. There was a long bulge in the stone that had not been there yesterday. Stones did not grow overnight. The hard surface shimmered for a few seconds, then a shape emerged. Not so slim or long-legged now, with a round, laughing face that, while scarcely fairy tale perfect, did possess a certain charm. To Yordis, the sturdy body was as alluring as the one seen through the haze of illusion, but she had no intention of revealing her vulnerability. I can't say much for your taste in men, she said coolly. The girl sat up and shrugged. There's so little entertainment here. Are you quite certain it was he I sang for? And that's all you're going to get for now. The end. Well, not the end, the middle, but whatever.
Thank you so much. That was intriguing and delightful. Interesting coming off of LJ's music with AIs to have the music of the trolls, the music of the magic. Wonderful. Our next reader is going to be Trisha J. Wooldridge. Trisha writes short stories, poetry, novels, and other stuff that occasionally wins awards. Child-friendly ones as T.J. Wooldridge. Find out more at anovelfriend.com. Trish, over to you.
You. Neither of these is child-friendly. Just to let you know. These are under by Trisha J. Wooldridge. The first thing I'm going to read, they're two very short pieces, is a poem called Bathtub Mary that recently came out in the dark literary magazine 34 Orchard. Bathtub Mary. They find murder victims in bathtubs, usually women. Blood stains drain not chocolate syrup, but blood, real blood, and all other fluids bodies make. But blood from women is most disturbing. Don't speak of bleeding women. Woman's blood is taboo. If the Virgin Mary had been approached today in the United States at 15, they'd say God statutory raped her, even though she gave consent. But it'd be all right for Joseph to marry her in a number of states. Outside of good Catholic homes, trademark, she lives inside bathtubs, stood on end, mimicry of the birth of Venus, but not pagan, certainly not pagan. In the poorer neighborhoods, rust stains like blood, where perfect porcelain meets fertile, unvirgin earth. She greets Avon ladies, Jehovah's Witnesses, survey takers, snake oil sellers with the same placid, non-judgmental smile, like a whore, like a mother, welcoming all to kneel and pay or pray. Elements fade her clothes until she is naked plaster. Vandals and rebellious children will paint her slutty bright, and time will spiderweb cracks over all her body, with no care to her immaculate conception. Like a dead hooker in a motel bathtub, she gives her love, is denied her pay, the divine feminine is broken into a million pieces, spiraling down a drain of recycled, rusty blood and prayers. Well, that is Bathtub Mary. The next piece is one I have not read out loud before. I recently got it accepted into the New England Horrors Writers Anthology, Wicked Creatures. And I'm a big fan of Mary Shelley, who is our matron saint of Broad Universe. And this is my very horror love story to the novel Frankenstein. This is the very first scene. My creator, Victor Frankenstein, promised to make me a mate, an equal to love, in return for my promise that we two would retreat into the wilderness far from mankind. He aborted that promise, so I broke mine. Instead, I vowed to unmake him through torment equitable to his transgressions upon me. That promise I fulfilled, but not with joy. I then made a new promise. I would surrender to the Arctic's icy prison, righteous judgment for my demonly wickedness. And I did for some time. But Frankenstein's hubris damns me still. What he created was not life, for what is alive must certainly die. I waited, entombed in ice atop the world, as Dante's Lucifer was frozen deep below hell, for an end that never came. Were there some divine creator, I concluded, his cruelty must be what drives mankind. Or perhaps there was no creator but mankind. Fearing insignificance, they designed gods to bless them with control over all, to assure them death was not merely the closing of an eye, a blink in time, nothing more. If death were just the end of consciousness, if mankind were nothing special for their sentience, why should I be denied final rest? What weight had any penitent promise I made? And if some divine creator should hold me accountable for my sins, what worse suffering could he impose? Nothing, nothing, I thought then. But am I not the inheritor of Frankenstein's sins, blessings, and consequences? He rationalized so eloquently. He inspired people to love him, to help him in his unholy creation of me. Even enthralled in the deepest madness, his friends loved him enough to risk their lives in his quest to destroy me. Let me tell you of love and promises. And that's the opening to Heart of Frankenstein. Thank you.
Trish, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And
you.
thanks for bringing a different note into the tune we're playing tonight. Our next reader will be Roxanne Bland. Award-winning author Roxanne Bland writes mashup speculative fiction. She is, and will always be, a fugitive from reality. You can find her online at roxannebland.com. And you'll need to be
All
off
right.
mute.
No, you know me and modern technology. At any rate, thank you, Elaine. I am reading from my newest novel, The Moreva of Asterisk, which is available at Amazon and just about everywhere else. Chapter 1. I could have you executed for this, Moreva Tehi, Asterisk said. My Devi grandmother, the goddess of love, scowled at me from her golden throne in the massive great hall of her equally massive A. Today, her long white hair had been woven into slender braids entwined with multicolored strands of tiny jewels. They sparkled in the incandescent light radiating from the ceiling and the bulbous wall-height fixtures. Her golden eyes burned with fury. Sitting on my heels, I bowed my head, not wanting to see her anger. I stared at the black and gold polished floor, trying to ignore the trickle of sweat snaking down my spine. My unbound hair, white like hers, hung over my face. Yes, most holy one, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You blaspheme by not celebrating Ora Namtar, the holiest rite of the gods. You are well aware that this was not Ora's sin, praising my role in creating Paris, but extolling all the deeds of the great pantheon in bringing this planet to life. Ora Namtar celebrates our creation of the Hakoi, and the worthiest, handpicked by me and my brothers and sisters, celebrated with us. Marduk asked me of your whereabouts. Your absence sorely disappointed him. I shuddered in fear and loathing. Marduk, Lord of the Skies, was Asterisk's twin brother and my granduncle. I had been scared of him since childhood and always made sure I was never alone with him. I hated the way he'd stare at me when no one was looking, licking his lips as if I were a juicy piece of meat just waiting to be devoured. I had been too young to participate in the last Ora Namtar and knew he would have been only too eager to get his hands on me during this one. Moreva Tehi, Asterisk's hard tone brought me back to the moment. You are my acolyte. Your participation was not an option. By your absence, you did not share your body with us, your brother and sister Morevs, and our worthy Hakoi. You sullied the sacredness of Ora Namtar. What do you have to say for yourself? I can only offer my most abject apologies, most holy one. Your apologies are not accepted. Yes, most holy one. Where were you? I was in the laboratory working on a cure for red fever. Our 4-year cycle will end this summer and thousands of Hakoi in the god cities and towns could die, so I know that, my grandmother snapped. But why did you miss Ora Namtar? Did you not hear the bells? Yes, most holy one. I heard them. I was about to lay aside my work when I noticed an anomaly in one of my Parian solutions, so I decided to take a minute to investigate. What I found, I just lost track of time. You lost track of time? She repeated, sounding incredulous. Do you expect me to believe that? Yes, most holy one. It is the truth. My head and heart began throbbing, my grandmother probing me for signs I had lied. But she wouldn't find any. Lying to her was pointless, and her punishment for lying was harsh. Swaying under the onslaught, I endured the pain without making a sound. After what seemed like forever, the throbbing eased, leaving me sick and dizzy. Very well. I accept what you say is true. I still do not accept your apology. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much, Roxanne. That was certainly an interesting lead in. We have gods and multiple hearts and who knows what all going on. Great world building. I love that. So our next reader is Kathryn Sullivan. Kathryn writes stories where girls are the explorers, the wizards, and the ones who solve problems and rescue people. Her latest release is The Crystal Throne. You can find her online at kathrynsullivan.com. And over to you, Kathy.
And I'll be reading a short story from my other collection, Agents, Adepts, and Apprentices, and it's called Communication Difficulties. The alien's thoughts were so noisy. Jenny just wished she could use its constant murmur to locate it exactly. Although that might come once she, that might come when she knew how to use her talent. Jenny scowled at the flock of flamingos milling before her. Contrary to what various television shows suggested, pulling a craft spaceship out of a marsh and trying to cover up any signs that had ever been there took time and hard work. That's probably why they never show that part, she thought. They just skipped to the Discovery returning and the ship gone. She pushed a sweat-draggled lock of red hair back out of her face. Tracking the former occupant of said spaceship through a mile swamp hadn't been much fun either. She glanced past the flock, noting the unbroken grasses beyond, then returned her attention to the tall pink birds. Oh well, might as well try the easy way first. Anyone needing a ride? She shouted in Galactic, startling the nearer birds. The closer flamingos settled, but then wings flapped with flashes of crimson at the far edge of the flock as one of their number bounded straight up head high. Me! It landed with a splash and hopped toward her. The flock scattered out of the alien's path. Me! Oh, thank the bright sky you came! The alien paused on its one long leg and looked back at the regrouping flock. Jenny bemusedly studied the bright pink head feathers atop the long-necked head and spiky pink-furred body. Snobs, it said. They wouldn't even talk to me. The flock's honks reminded Jenny of geese. She shook her head at the thought of how the conversations might have gone. Maybe weren't speaking their language. Nonsense. Everyone speaks Galactic. The alien lowered its head to peer at her from under its fluffy fringe. You're speaking Galactic. It straightened and looked back at the flock. Next you'll say they aren't sapient. Anyone can see how intelligent they are. The flock waded slowly through the lagoon, their heads turning back and forth in a synchronized display. Snobs, the alien repeated. It paused. Though perhaps they were respecting my confidence. I did tell them I was here undercover. Undercover? Jenny looked again at the images in the alien's relatively unshielded mind. You didn't crash? Telepathy was still new to her. Perhaps she was interpreting the situation wrong, and the alien had a valid reason to be on the closed world. Did I miss a memo? The alien bounced slowly in place. Well, yes, I did, but only because I was so excited to see the avians of this planet. There were so many, and they fly. I lost control and crashed. But actually, I'm here to communicate with other avians and tell them of their kin among the stars. He raised his voice, addressing the flock. You do not need to live in fear of the reptile oppressors. I have come to set you free. Jenny mentally sighed, and here I thought Jen was kidding when she told me about the amphibian freedom fighter. She'd heard enough, time to leave before any of several government agencies caught up. And now that the alien was speaking Galactic, she could pick out words among its thought images. Foremost among them was how to convince its featherless biped to help it retrieve its ship and find another group of friendlier avians before the dreaded Bureau of Closed Planets turned up. The resident agent of the dreaded bureau shook her head. Not your day, Jenny said aloud. She remembered the sign she'd passed earlier advertising Captain Bill's Gator Wrestling. But you know, it might have been a lot worse. And that's the end there.
Thank you very much, Kathy. That is so much fun. It is a good thing that we have not encountered the reptile overlords yet, right? So our next reader today is going to be Anne E.G. Nydam, who writes and illustrates books about wonder, creativity, adventure, and magic. She is serious about joy. Find her online at nydamprints.com. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you. I will be reading from this book, the full title of which is On the Virtues of Beasts of the Realms of Imagination, Their Features, Habits, and Dispositions, and the Valuable Lessons for Our Own Lives to be Learned Therefrom, illustrated by the author with numerous relief block prints of various wonderful creatures taken from her own true and accurate observations and experiences while exploring the fantastic realms, which pretty well tells you what you're going to get. I'm going to read 2 creatures, and I've got my illustrations here. First is of the umbrellophant. The umbrellophant is a beast native to the rainy regions of the world. They use their umbels not only to protect their heads from excessive rain or sun, but also to slow their descent when they leap from high places. Truly, it is a marvelous sight to witness a herd of umbrellophants floating from a mountaintop, appearing as light as dandelion down, until they reach the bottom and the ground shakes with their impact and the puddles splash in fountains beneath their massive feet. Not only for themselves do the umbrellophants extend their umbels, however, for they are most welcoming beasts. Should another creature desire refuge, the umbrellophant will gladly make room, so that it is not uncommon to see a number of smaller birds and beasts accompanying an umbrellophant, pleased to find shade from the searing sun or shelter from the pelting rain. The ancient writer says, when caught by a shower, forgetting all fears, they stand underneath the umbrellophant's ears. From the umbrellophant, we can learn the importance of welcome and of making others feel accepted. Perhaps it is most especially important to welcome those who are not just like ourselves, for an umbrellophant's shelter is of far greater importance to creatures who have no umbels of their own, and a kind and welcoming word is of most importance to the stranger. Next up, we have of the ziz. The ziz is a bird so great that it can eclipse the sun, and standing in the deep ocean, the water reaches only to its ankles. The ancient writer says, it once happened that travelers on a vessel noticed a bird. As he stood in the water, it merely covered his feet and his head knocked against the sky. The onlookers thought the water could not have any depth at that point, and they prepared to take a bath there. A heavenly voice warned them, alight not here. Once a carpenter's axe slipped from his hand at this spot, and it took 7 years to touch bottom. The bird the travelers saw was none other than the ziz. From the ziz, we may be warned of our tendency to fit all that we encounter into the pattern of those things we already know, so that we see what we expect to see. Sometimes something is so huge and obvious that we cannot even see it at all. Or perhaps we see something but fail to realize just how important it is, convincing ourselves it must be something more ordinary. Remembering this lesson, do not allow your cynicism to belittle the power of love, or to convince you that what is wonderful cannot be true. I have written nothing in this volume that you did not already know in your heart, yet you may be inclined to consider it nothing more than the over-optimistic longings of the naive. Do not be fooled by the apparent wisdom of the cynic, for truly, the power of love is not less than the ziz, far greater than it may at first appear.
Thank you so much, Anne. I really enjoyed that one. These seemed like some lessons that we would like to share with a lot of people beyond, from our audience to the ears of many. So our next reader will be Claire Devon. USA Today best-selling author, Claire loves to write across a wide range of genres. Claire's website is www.clairedevon.com. Claire.
Thank you, Elaine. I switched my background to the spotlight of the trilogy I'll be reading from. It's called Redemption of the Gorgons, and this is the first in the series. Each book follows one of the immortal or one of the Gorgons, and they've been tasked with trying to find out how gods are getting killed. So this one is called Gorgon's Price, and this is the beginning. For the first time in millennia, Euryale woke up without a head full of snakes. Her ears registered the quiet. Since they had been transformed into monsters by Athena so long ago, she had spent every waking moment and some sleeping ones with the sound of hissing. Now the silence settled around her like a blanket, soft and low and a little unnerving. After all this time, she was alone. Her snakes didn't have sentience, but they had life and moved according to their whims. Now they were gone, along with the other manifestations of a goddess's displeasure. Scrambling up, she dashed to the bathroom and grabbed the hand mirror. That was the one reflection she allowed herself. Euryale, or Alexis as some called her, felt her head, unable to believe it. Nothing moved. Euryale dropped the hand mirror and yanked the sheet off the larger mirror. It, like all other reflective surfaces in the place, was covered. It had been thousands of years since she'd seen her face in anything more than a rare glimpse. She studied her hand. When she'd gone to bed last night, it had been tipped in claws, but now it was like any other hand. She turned it over. The back was cracked and in need of moisturizer, but it was skin and not scales. Her cell phone rang, startling her. She knew who it was before she reached for the device. "Athena," she said after she pressed the speaker, "has it happened to you as well?" She wanted to leap for joy, but that would send her miles up. Or would it? Perhaps she didn't have her power. But that would be stupid. Ares would not have offered her this bargain if he had taken away her powers. That was the whole point. "Yes," her older firstborn sister said, displeasure in her voice. "Sister, I told you not to do it. You cannot trust the gods." Euryale had agreed for each of them, but hadn't been certain how Athena would feel in the end. Of the three, she had embraced their monstrous aspects and used them to her advantage in battle. "You agreed," Euryale said, her back stiffening. "You too desired a human appearance." Athena, or Saskia as she was called to those who did not know her, snorted into the phone. "Whether I did or not, I warned you about trusting the gods." She exhaled a long breath. "But it is done. We have taken a human form once again. We still have our powers, which I believe is part of your bargain. I am a warrior. If it had been otherwise, I would never have agreed. If the gods had not been good to their word, I would already be on my way to Mount Olympus to confront them. You will have to test for yourself, but most should be intact. It is your hair and skin that have transformed, that is all. We are, no longer monsters." Euryale released a sigh. She translated Athena's words in her mind. Bastards, yes, the Greek gods were bastards. It will take some time to get used to this shift. Just as it did when that bitch Athena changed us. She should have turned on her rapist brother Poseidon. Instead, she took it out on us. As is often true of the gods, they stick to their own. We are but poor descendants of those they would rather forget. Our parents are descended from Gaia and gods in their own right. But we are monsters. We are not monsters anymore, sister. Athena paused for a moment. While I dislike what you did to achieve this, I do have to admit, it will be nice to be able to move in society without concealment. This was as close to a thank you as she was going to get. Euryale beheld her Wyoming home. She had chosen the United States for many reasons, but paramount among them was the cold climate where she could be bundled up much of the year. The rest of the time, she wore scarves to conceal her. "Euryale," Athena said, and paused. The line crackled around them, the connection iffy. She would not ask where Athena was and doubted that her sister would tell her. She often operated in secrecy. If she needed Euryale to know, she would tell her. "Yes, sister?" There was another pause and Athena took a breath. The sound echoed through the line, full of portents and meaning. "I will go to Medusa," Athena said. "I will ascertain if she has changed. That cave in Sumeria, now Iraq, should be safe enough, but who is to say what could happen if she awakes from her stasis? You deal with the gods, and I will deal with our sister." Although mortal, Medusa had been gifted with a piece of her sibling's immortality. She would not live forever and had spent years in stasis until her sisters were able to smuggle her head back to her after Perseus cut it off. Medusa, the prettiest of the three, did not take the change well. It was safer for her to remain asleep. The end.
Thank you so much, Claire. That was certainly fascinating. I love the twist on the familiar stories, and I couldn't wait to find out more. So I will have to look up that website. So I'm going to be batting sweep tonight. I'm the final reader. I write a knowledge-inspired adventure fiction, including the Dark Apostle series about medieval surgery and the Bone Guard archaeological thrillers. I'm going to be reading tonight from, let's call it a teaser for a book that should be coming out next April. And the best way to find out more about this book and all of my upcoming projects is on Facebook at E.C. Ambrose Author. So the piece that I'm going to be reading is from a book called Drake Master, and it is set in China during the Mongol invasions around 1257, and features a varied cast of characters who are going to confront a clockwork doomsday device. This originally was intended as the prologue, and involves a couple of characters from the past during the early years of the device. The Year of the Horse, Yang Metal Cycle, 1090 CE. Chiang Mai-lo, imperial astronomer, ran for his life, or rather, for the lives of hundreds. Ling Rui gripped his hand, and the rough stone beneath their feet transformed as they moved, smoothing and surging upward, making every step buoyant. He missed the days when she used her power to taunt him, causing flowers to bloom or butterflies to land on his inkstone and leave their tiny tracks among his notes and observations. Already his heart thundered and his feet ached. Sweat slicked his palm and he nearly lost his grip, but she held him, slightly ahead, her face straining toward the Valley of the Sages, toward her home. "How much longer?" she called. "Don't know," he panted. He glanced up, but the stars would not tell him. It was the device that ruled tonight, ticking inexorably, a mechanical hand of fate that, once set in motion, could not be stopped until it had fulfilled its destiny. Ling Rui tugged him into motion, urgent. "I slow you," he panted. "Leave me." "No!" Her strong hand gripped him tighter. Her hair uncoiled from its careful wrappings and waved about her shoulders, a dark river against the deep blue night, gems and ornaments winking in the light as they fell away. "Yes, yes, yes," he insisted, 3 times, to show how important it was. He stopped again, pulling his hand free. "They must be warned. You will go faster alone." She hesitated, there above him, and then gave a nod and sprang into motion, the earth welling up to greet her and to help her on her way. The mountains rose all around him, echoing with wind and the tumble of water. Mai-lo listened hard for the sound of pursuit. Had Deng Ho noticed their escape? Perhaps not. Perhaps he stayed with the device, calm in the knowledge of their captivity, ready to kill them at a convenient time, to prevent anyone from knowing what they had made, until he believed the emperor worthy of their skill. Mai-lo pictured a flash of light that seared his eyes, the terrified yelp of a helpless assistant caught in the blaze, and then the sudden absence. A man turned to ash in an instant by the baleful light of a distant star, a star that he helped bring to earth with the harness of gears and instruments and magic. As above, so below. He shuddered and pushed himself into motion again. Without Ling Rui's power to shape the chi of the mountain, the ground grew rough again, and he stumbled after her, still moving as fast as he could. For a time, he heard her breathing ahead of him, and caught glimpses of her in the distance, the sheen of starlight on her hair as she ran toward the ridge. She was nearly there. For a moment, his heart rose. She would make it. At least in this, Deng Ho would fail. Was there still time to evacuate the farms and houses? Then, the night before him exploded with a brilliant glow. Ling Rui screamed, silhouetted against that light, then falling to her knees. The glow roiled upward, like a blaze in a fireworks factory, then flared into a pale smoke and sucked itself back into nothing. Its afterimage lingered in his vision, as if the sun itself had appeared and then vanished. The earth gave a soft tremor, and the scent of burnt grain drifted on the breeze, all that remained of every living thing in the valley beyond. Thank you. That is a teaser for my novel Drake Master, which, if all goes well, will be out in April of 2022. So let me see if I can bring everybody back on. I'd like to thank all of our fabulous readers tonight. That was certainly an exciting variety, and I hope that our audience has had their fancies tickled and their interest piqued to perhaps look us up online. Again, we are a gathering of members from the Broad Universe organization, and you can find out more about Broad Universe at broaduniverse.org. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.